Hi all, as promised, I am doing the Feedback Friday for Lady Bits episode 3. I did not do the song though, so we're going to do the song now. Ready? It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! Jazz hands. Okay, I am back. Excuse me while I fight off a cough. This has been part of the issue. I had a bad allergic reaction to something, probably my host's Christmas tree on New Year's Eve. I will spare you the gory details, but I think I'm still having the hangover from it, so to speak. So if I sound a bit winded, kind of like a sort of thing, it's not me stressing out or anything like that. It's just I'm having a bit of trouble breathing. But you guys know me and promises, if I can do something, I do it. It might not necessarily be smart for me. More on that later. First of all, this has been a little bit different. I think it kind of worked better in some ways. There was more time between the episode launching and me talking about the feedback. It gave more people time to watch it. I initially did it based on first impressions because you guys know how YouTube works. The first people that watch something tend to be the people who are organically interested in it. Their opinions are not biased by message boards or, groups of any kind. And then as a video's been out longer, you get the groupthink and the echo chambers and the framing that people see a post and they jump on a video with a predetermined opinion. Their opinion on the video has already been framed, and so it's not an authentic response. And I've learned that it's not worth fighting with people who are coming from those echo chambers, because no matter what you say, it just feeds into their predetermined thinking. It spins around, and I'm not convinced this is intentional. I think this is just sort of a human desire for belonging in an era where nobody really feels like they belong anywhere. But it's something that is impossible to fight. You have to convince the people you can convince. And, then you start, propaganda messaging, blah, 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 blah. No, that's not a question of that. The stated mission for this program is to start a dialogue. That's it. That's it. And I really get the sense people are starting to get that and starting to become more comfortable with that idea. There was a comment, it's fairly high up in the, how YouTube ranks the comments, but this commenter said, well, what do you know? A feminist just managed to not straight insult me, insult my intelligence, hold my hand, or belittle me, and I found myself actually listening to what she had to say. Funny how that works. That's it. That's the mission here. And I think that is being really, really effective. It's not a question of what I'm saying. That's gravy when people are interested in and think it's a good idea. And there was a lot of that in episode 3, but I'm going to put a pin in that and continue this thought. For me, it is less important that people agree with what I'm saying, because you guys know that I believe that if two people agree 100% of something, something's wrong. So, which is why I still to this day have trouble understanding why people get so damn upset about disagreements. I'm starting to understand that more, but again, more on that later. But if the comments are any indication, the dialogue is happening. And that makes me very, very happy. And I have to thank you guys, because I couldn't do that alone. I can set a good example, but you guys have to pick up that ball and continue with it, and you have. So I greatly, greatly appreciate that. I'm very glad that you guys have elected to be part of this experiment and participate in good faith. There's not enough of that on the internet right now. I think people are overall too suspicious of people's motives. But I'm very happy about that. As I said to the patrons on Thursday in the patron only video, yes, if you become a Patreon, you do get access to the Thursday videos, which are more technical. I talk more about, the specifics of what went wrong in places and things like that, because, if you're putting money into something and not getting any investor stipend out of it, the least I can do is, there's little previews, there's early access. That's why the one person mentioned the video was timestamped 3 days ago. That's why this time I managed to get the video done and uploaded on Christmas Eve. And so I put it up on for backers to watch first. In part, I will fully admit, because if they're running glaring technical errors, they'll tell me before I get embarrassed with it being out in the general public. There are some technical things I'm still working on. It's difficult being a 1+1 person show. Some things aren't where I'd like them to be. I'm getting them as close as I'd like them to be as I can, but overall I'm pretty happy of the quality of the work. I did do one meeting, not going to get into details, but they asked me that, where do you see it going? BS Hollywood question. And I'm sure it was meant in good faith, but it's one of those questions where anybody who's been in the media industry long enough knows you can't really control where your work goes. You can be prepared for opportunities, you can be prepared to seize them, but anybody who thinks that you have absolute control of how people are going to respond to your work is just, you're setting yourself up for a huge amount of disappointment and bitterness when you do that. And so, it was sort of, as long as, if I can get a good series by YouTube standards, I'm proud of that. And it seems like we're actually doing it. Obviously the issue, and I've said this from the beginning, dialogue is extremely important to me. Extremely important. A fundamental part of my life, of my experience on this planet, is when people talk to each other, things get better. When people fight each other, things get worse. And there is no substitute for people sitting down and talking in a respectful manner. And what I'm learning more and more is that the entire concept of respect is something that we need to collectively relearn, not just in gaming, but in the world in general. And I think that gaming is actually a little ahead of it, based on my experience, in that gaming is a place where very loud disagreement is permitted. And it's not, it does go over the line in places. But I think that at least the discussion is happening for the betterment of the industry. Pretty much every other form of media, it's amazing the echo chambers that form. And that's why things tend to get stuck, and you basically get the same movie over and over and over again with a different coat of paint. And I'm happy to be a part of that. I'm happy to be a part of that in gaming, despite the noise. And I get accused of a lot of things because I hold that position. And that's when I kind of check out, when it's like people start telling me what my motivations are. It's like, my motivations have been clear from the beginning. They've been consistent. I put out a whole, mission statement document. There are some people who just live to make people look like hypocrites, and we're not going to get anywhere that way. No product is perfect. And I mean, one of the things about Lady Bits is, and this is what I said, I get to sort of the content and people with agreeing with the content, that being gravy. This is what I mean by that. There's a lot of big swings. I try to take at least one big swing per episode and see how people respond. And it has worked. I think it works better and better each episode. A couple people caught the fact that episode 3 was sort of a building on the principles presented in episodes 1 and 2. And I think it worked quite well. Episodes 1 and 2 were a bit rocky because and I get why. So this is not intended. This is a totally non-judgmental statement. People still treat presenting ideas as agreeing with those ideas. And that's not necessarily so. The way I came up in both, you know, I hate to say academia, but let's say scholarship, thinking, right? Just general thinkosphere. And journalism as well. You cannot just throw out what's known because you disagree with it. You have to state the consensus as we know it, as well as the other side of the argument. It's, you know, the whole thing about understanding your opponent's side of the argument, as well as they understand that. It's been credited to some modern thinkers. It actually goes all the way back to a Jewish scholar named Hillel. The Hillelian method is you present the other side very, very clearly and then show why it's wrong. And I try to do that because I think that's a way of showing respect even when you disagree. You are showing knowledge of the other person's perspective and them just going, you're wrong, you're bad, you're evil, literally the devil, victim. Now, some people don't get that. I have to accept that some people are not going to get it. Some people are going to not get it and then get it. Some people don't want to get it. They just want to demonize people who disagree. But I think it's really important to understand stuff like, you know, accepted theories of gays and accepted theories of, you know, the definition of sexism, which, as I said in episode 2, is awful. But I need to explain why it's awful, because otherwise it's just completely arrogant to throw that all out and say, I know better. Here's my definition. Ain't I a special snowflake? Just accept mine. No, I have to make an argument for change because I believe that the onus is on the person advocating change to show that it's actually an improvement, not just a bunch of other terms we have to learn because they're fashionable at this moment. And we didn't get hung up, and this really surprised me. We didn't get hung up in episode 3 with establishment stuff the same way we did in episode 2. I don't know why, other than I kind of blew through gaze theory. Maybe it's because gaze theory is better understood than ambivalent sexism. I don't know, but people didn't get hung up with that. Let's go through what the accepted scholars will tell you. Now, I'm not going to stop doing that because I think it's very important that people know how to navigate what they're reading and that people do know that there is debate within, I hate to say feminism, let's say academic feminism. There is a certain amount of debate on these, how do I put this, concepts that the general public sees as set in stone when they're not. A certain wing of, I say 2 wings of academic feminism are sort of known in popular culture, and that's because they're radical enough to cut above the noise of everything else, because there's a lot of competing theories. It's a big mess. I don't even like the idea of academic feminism because it's taking a whole bunch of things that have nothing to do with each other and trying to patch it together as some kind of coherent whole, and it's just not. I mean, one guy, I get asked for reading materials a lot, like what do I recommend? And I always feel stuck with that because I say, that's like saying, recommend a book about animals. Well, a book about animals in general is going to be the equivalent of a picture book that's just C is for cat, D is for dog. And that is what a lot of these sort of omnibus feminist books end up being. They're surface. And there's a lot of emotion And yes, it's a definition of terms, but it never gets in deep anywhere. Whereas a lot of the stuff that goes on in academics is, you know, the toenails of a Lhasa Apso, which that is a dog, and a dog is an animal, but a book on the toenails of a Lhasa Apso is not going to tell you anything about fish. And this is the challenge I encountered when I started tackling this stuff about gaming, and I realized that this is what's going wrong in discussions of games, is people come out of school with these ideas, with these words, with these concepts, and these concepts were amazing to them, and they wanted to go out and use the concepts, because a fundamental thing about nerds is we like to be useful. And so they go out and they try to feminism in the real world, and people get smacked in the face very quickly with the reality that a lot of the stuff we are taught at the academic level is offshoots of Marxist class-based theory with the words changed. And there's a very good reason for that historically that I got into a little on Gamer's Guide to Feminism, is that every major wave of feminism, especially the first and second, piggybacked off another movement and eventually and kind of lost in terms of meaningful social progress. During the first wave, the suffrage was happening at the same time as worker rights, the idea of unions and collective bargaining and all that stuff. And there was a real schism between the upper classes, whose husbands had the right to vote because they owned enough property to vote. This is mainly in England, where things got really real and, you know, stuff was getting blown up. And the working classes, who didn't give a hoot about the right to vote because their husbands weren't landowners, and therefore their own husbands weren't given the right to vote. I'm going to get into more of this on episode 4. This is going to be super critical because it does matter. You know, in the second wave, it was torn between women's rights and what was called civil rights. Aren't they the same thing? Well, civil rights was code basically for African American rights. And so Black women basically had to choose between their race and their gender, which any decent social theory doesn't force a person to do. Hence, intersectionalism, which tried to solve that problem in a really imperfect way by just going, everything's racist, everything's sexist. And okay, you believe that, now what? And the now what is the big problem. Because everyone can agree, it's easy to go, everything's racist, everything's sexist. But what do you do about it? You know, the thing that has driven me crazy about feminist activism, and I do not consider myself part of feminist activism. I am an entertainer. I am an educator. I am not an activist. I don't believe it works. And people are like, what do you mean? Social justice, all this stuff. If you really look deep down, the big movements in society, yes, you have to make something popular enough to get people comfortable enough that they'll support it. You can't just introduce a piece of legislation and force people to agree. That the closest you get is someplace like Canada, where we tend to have majority government situations, and they can put in things like, you know, gay marriage is legal, too bad. And there's a bit of a hue and cry, but then everything settles down and realizes the sky doesn't fall. In a lot of government systems, you don't have that. Something has to be popular enough first, then the legislation happens. You can't do that if your activism is irritating everyone. And the big sea changes have happened because somebody decided to create a character that embodied certain marginalized peoples and make those people seem human. You know, it is not an accident that shows like Sanford and Son and the Jeffersons had a huge impact on civil rights, on seeing Black people as people. Same with shows like Ellen and Will and Grace in terms of gay rights. Screaming at people on the internet does not win hearts and minds. It puts people back in bunkers. They're afraid to ask questions. And I find myself having to smack off, not smack down, because we don't do that. But, you're not part of this discussion. You're just screaming at everybody, with some people who come in and they clearly have something important and they clearly have something to say, but all they're communicating is, I am really, really, really pissed off. And then they can't even admit they're pissed off. We don't get understanding that way. We don't get common understanding that way. And the more I work on this project, the more I work on Lady Bits, and the more I hear from you guys, and the more I see what you guys like and what you guys don't like, I am increasingly convinced that the thing that is most effective is somebody coming up and not being afraid to be seen and just telling their story, and allow people to sort of ask questions. And you're going to get the occasional person who's going to be a jerk, and that's educational its own way. But just let people relate to one person as another person. People understand that. This highly technical jargon, people don't understand. The class warfare, people don't understand. People understand one person talking to another person, which is why run-on jokes like, I hate The Sims work, right? It's an opinion. And it was fun to do that, Heart of Darkness meets 2001 A Space Odyssey kind of thing, using the eagle-eyed people may have noticed that the music that ran in the background of that was the scene in the original King's Quest where you go down in the well and then you drown. That's the music. It was just so perfect for the game over screen. But it's those sorts of things, they don't matter in and of themselves. What matters with things like that is that people are willing to be seen. And I think that there aren't enough people in gaming willing to be seen. They hide behind personas or social justice or these cartoonish caricatures of tropes, ironically enough. And that's the thing I was skewering with the Gingham shirt. It wasn't plaid, it was gingham. People asked if that was a direct shot at Anita Sarkeesian. No. There is an element of that character that is an in-joke. It was kind of a and I know to a friend who was in a really rough situation, and we're trying to laugh about what was really a horrible scene. But it's interesting to me when I do something that's basically, I'm going to dress like a stereotype. And it just ends up people thinking, was that a specific person? That was sort of the whole thing about it's the proper feminist uniform. That has been, that whole plaid shirt and army boots thing has existed since at least the 1970s, perhaps the 1960s. That's a dork side. It was associated somewhat with the so-called Lavender Menace of feminism, and when the straight cisgendered faction of feminism realized they were real assholes about the lesbian component of feminism, for whatever reason they just decided to adopt that subversive gender performance dress to show how woke they were, not getting that these particular lesbians dress that way because they wanted to dress that way. And in some ways, they're signaling to other women who like women that they're sort of open to that sort of thing. There's no need for everyone else to dress that way. But that's been sort of the problem. And that's what I've been trying to address with things like the idea of a performative gaze. And this is the last thing I'll talk about because going on too long. But that was a big swing. I didn't know how it was going to go. I thought that actually offering theory on YouTube was going to be dismissed as pseudo-intellectualism. That was not the response I got from people who bothered to leave a comment. And that was a big learning experience for me, that people do accept YouTube as a serious place for thought. And that is something I've been wondering about for a while. Now, the only way to find out is to test it. Now, I don't think anybody can cite YouTube on an academic paper. That's something I'm going to have to figure out what to do, whether I even care to be citable. But people really liked that hard theory, the mass comm theory, the criticism, the visual shorthand, all that stuff. People really liked it. Not everybody got it. People are quite prone to either or thinking as opposed to and or thinking. All the sort of programmers in the world are going, and everybody else is going, huh? What's the difference? And both can be true. So you can have a situation where both can be true, or one or the other can be true. Move on to the next step anyway. If it can only be one and not both, that is a different input, right? And some people have a really hard time because of the Marxism-inspired academic background that they got at, unfortunately, very good schools that they didn't realize were sort of influenced by the Frankfurt School. But this is a huge part of the problem, is you've got the social justice language that is very either or, pick one. And then you've got programming language, all these engineers and programmers who are going like and or and either or is very different thinking. One group is open to both. The other is only open to, if you say this, you are in group. If you say that, you are out group. Pick a side. And getting back to what I was saying earlier, if you ask people to pick a side, you will lose them. You cannot go in with a stick, not focus on your carrots, and expect to persuade anybody. All you can get is, let me have 5 minutes of your time, or let me have a half hour of your time, or let me have an hour of your time. Part of the problem is that, 42 minutes on the damsel in distress trope, nobody cares that much except a small group of people who defend it like crazy and attack anybody who, insists perhaps you're navel gazing. All you can ask from people is a hearing. And that's all I attempted to do with this program. And it's working. Some people say, why isn't it more popular? Why isn't it getting more views? Well, because unfortunately, in order to get it more views, instead of it just growing organically, and it is, each episode grows faster than the previous one, so it is growing. But you only get, into the stratosphere if you cause controversy, and I think what I'm saying is pretty controversial. It's, but I'm not going out there and picking fights. And so that's not going to get the headline. Also, I've been pretty critical of the games press, so I do not expect anything from them. That's fair. Cause and effect. You don't bite that hand and expect it to feed you. I'm fine with that. I accept that. I'd rather a smaller group of people who get it and are willing to have a discussion than a whole bunch of people hate watching. which is why, you know, that's precisely why you obtain funding for something in advance instead of building it and hoping they'll come. So I'll wrap there. That's sort of the feedback. Next week, I'm going to do, I promised my spoilery comments on Star Wars The Last Jedi. So I'm going to do that on Monday. And then Tuesday, just for shits and giggles, I'm going to do a loot box opening, whatever you call that, unboxing, because I forgot to cancel my Harry Potter loot box order. So I figure, what the hell. Okay. Thanks for watching. See you guys next week, and I am already working on Lady Bits episode 4. Like I said, talked to some, gave you a little bit of a sneak peek, but that is going to be how do game developers benefit from having women on the team, hence women in the workforce history, right? Okay, so catch you on the flip. As I said, I've been watching, you know, that Geico commercial, like, catch you on the flip, suckers! The Skeletor. That wasn't a good impression. I've done better. But yeah, I am working on that. As I said to the patrons, I am aiming for first week of February in that. That might be ambitious, but working on it. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for watching.